Good evening and welcome to the program Capital Markets. I'm Temple Ashaju. Now, two notable events took place this week as the capital markets tailspins in volatility and investors' apathy. First, it was the third Capital Markets Committee meeting, which held on Tuesday, where the Director General of the Securities and Exchange Commission, Mr. Munir Gwazo, explains the collaborative efforts between the markets and the fiscal authorities. The second major event of the week held on Thursday, and it's the Presidential Policy Dialogue of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, an event where the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, laid out the immediate economic objectives of the government and provided business leaders with details of the President Muhammadu Buhari-led administration's plans to engage more with the private sector. But the news of these meetings had little or no impact on capital markets, as the bearish sentiment that opened the markets this week ended it in the negative territory, with activity level of the market advancing by just 20% and the average value declining 17.1%. Also, as the domestic bond market remains soft with negative sentiments, the Nigerian Stock Exchange revised its bond listing fees to attract more listings and break its counterpart's monopoly. On the show this evening, we'll bring you a guest who will explain the implications of that review, and it is hoped that he will help us to understand what this means for the markets. But for now, let's bring you highlights of the Vice President's comments at the Presidential Policy Dialogue with select captains of industry.
The President has approved the establishment of the Presidential Council on the Ease of Doing Business, and that Presidential Council has already started to meet. We intend in the next couple of weeks to release a broad set of guidelines on what steps will be taken and what steps will be, and how quickly those steps will be implemented. We intend to draw up timelines to ensure that there is adequate accountability as to what is done and how quickly this is done. We've been talking to the states at the level of the National Economic Council and at consultations with individual states to ensure that we're able to deliver on such matters as land titles and development control permits. We think that is absolutely important, that in order to deliver on our ease of doing business, that the states collaborate with us effectively. And we've received firm commitments from the states that they will work with us closely to ensure that we're able to deliver on our promises on ease of doing business. The present administration is a strong believer in public-private sector dialogue. We've scheduled periodic meetings with the private sector to ensure quality feedback and to make the policy process inclusive. We will institutionalize a quarterly business briefing as a means of making permanent this policy dialogue starting the next quarter.
The Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo. Now, earlier we said the Capital Markets Committee meeting held this week, and after the two-day meeting, the leadership of the Securities and Exchange Commission briefed journalists about the discussions that transpired at the session. At the briefing, the Director General of the Commission, Mr. Munir Gwazo, explains the outcome of the Capital Markets Implementation Council dialogue, which centers around incentives, dividend warrants, regulatory powers between the SEC and the Debt Management Office. Now, let's take a listen at some of those key points that we've profiled from the meeting.
As I said, we had a very successful meeting yesterday, CMC meeting. And prior to that, we had the CAMIC. I'm sure you are all aware of the CAMIC, Capital Market Implementation Council, which is an advocacy group of capital market initiatives being led by no other person in this market than Mr. Tola Mabolori. And some few weeks ago, as part of the mandate of CAMIC in ensuring that the capital market master plan is being mainstreamed into the government policy, the CAMIC members met in Abuja and we paid a courtesy calls to both the ministers of finance and also budget and planning. We also saw His Excellency, the Vice President of Nigeria. We saw the Governor of Central Bank. We also saw the Attorney General of the Federation. We also saw the Speaker of the House of Representatives. This is to ensure that we have their buy-in, because for you to be able to implement the master plan successfully, you need the buy-in of both the executives, the legislature, and the judiciary. And you recall that in February this year, we had a session with the judiciary, 2 days workshop, in which we discussed with them extensively on what the capital market is, what SEC is, and largely what the Investment and Securities Act is, so that we can get their support and cooperation. We also had a session, 2-day session with the National Assembly, SEC partner with the Committee of Capital Market, both at the House of Reps and at the Senate, and we had a very successful outing. So that's the part of the advocacy group, so that we have all the strata of the government, like I say, both the judiciary and this is to also buy into the master plan. After that, just last Saturday, we also had a very successful meeting with the Honorable Minister of Finance, chaired by the Minister herself. And we had in attendance the Chairman of Federal Inland Revenue Services and the DG of DMO. For the last 30 to 40 years, the capital market has been clamoring for certain concessions with respect to taxes on certain capital market products, which we believe that it will further enhance the development of the market. We also realize that there are some overlaps in terms of functions of SEC and DMO, and we're able to streamline those overlaps. I know you asked me those concessions in terms of tax. It's work in progress. At the last meeting we had with the Honorable Minister and the Chairman of FRS, we agreed to fine-tune those areas, and they were willing to give concessions where it is needed. So we set up a small team that would work on those areas. By the time it's concluded, we'll be able to share with you. But for now, the cheering news is that every stakeholder in the capital market is ready to assist for the growth and the development of the capital market, which will achieve our aim within the master plan. You also notice that we've still been having issues with respect to the e-dividend. The report NIPS gave us last week was very discouraging. Only about 6,000 Nigerians have registered for the e-dividend. SEC has been in the vanguard of advocating for people to go and register for their e-dividend. But whenever you go to the bank or to any of the registrars, people tend to be frustrated because what the banks requires, there seems to be some misunderstanding between the banks and the registrars. So we had a very successful meeting on Monday where we had all the registrars, we had all the head of operations of banks, we had the leadership of NIPS, and we also got the director payment system from Central Bank. And we sat down and exhaustively we discussed the issues. One, we agreed that each bank is going to appoint an e-dividend champion, and CBN would direct each bank to have an e-dividend champion within its own bank. Then that e-dividend champion will now be the one that will be liaising with the head of operations of each bank. Two, all registrars will also have an e-dividend champion. So for every registrar in this country, they will dedicate one person as the e-dividend champion, and we agree that the compliance officer for every registrar will now serve as the e-dividend champion. He will also cascade the message to those officers that handle that. Three, we also agree that anytime the registrar or the bank had an issue that requires certain clarification, NIPS is ready to provide that clarification. And we're able to be on the same page, and the registrars agrees that within 3-4 days, if they have an issue with respect to identity verification for any investor, within 3 or 4 days they will reach out to the bank or to NIPS and sort for those clarifications. With that, we believe that we had achieved a lot of progress, and SEC will now continue with its advocacy and public enlightenment with respect to the e-dividend. Our expectation last year was that by now we'd have between 500 to 1 million Nigerians that would have registered for the e-dividend. But the number of 6,000 plus, we felt it is very, very low. At CMC, we also agreed that henceforth, by 31st of June 2007, no registrar will issue dividend warrant any longer. The market agreed, and we're going to implement it. We believe that's the only way that will propel people to now go and register for the e-dividend.